Welcome to Managing the Risk of Open Payments Validated Spend Reporting Before CMS Submission. I'm your moderator, Thomas Sullivan, and if you are trying to get the audio code is on the is listed on below, and it should be in your mailbox. A couple webinar housekeeping rules for today is this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be provided after today's presentation. In addition, this is an hour-long webinar, so if you want to plug in your headsets or turn up your speakers so you can listen to it, be helpful. You can also connect either via voice over IP or phone, depending on how your computer is set up. If you can, keep your lines muted unless you're asked a question, and please ask your questions via the panel on the GoToWebinar. There's a little button on the right-hand side that says Questions. Just enter in your questions in the kind of question box there, and we'll try to address them as the webinar is going along and also during the Q&A session. And a copy of this presentation's slides will be sent to you. Please note all slides are copyrighted and may be used with attribution to the copyright holder. For anything related to the webinar support, there's a call-in number here, which is 832-772-6000, extension 501, that you're welcome to call in on. Kind of give you guys an idea of the webinar flow today, because we're going to have some demonstrations and then some speaker presentations and then a demonstration of kind of some compliance scenarios and then question and answers. And again, this is a little bit more about our agenda. There's kind of the implications of transparency. We're going to look at a case study of one specific case that's come up that was recently settled, and then evaluation using the open payments data, and then evaluation of spend before CMS submissions, and then kind of a platform demonstration, and then Q&A, as I said before. Kind of speaker profiles. I'm Thomas Sullivan. I'm the editor and author of popular website Policy in Medicine. We cover important compliance and regulatory issues affecting the pharmaceutical and device industry. And many of you have seen we've been ranked pretty high in Google on Physician Payment Sunshine Act and open payments. In addition to that, I'm a publisher of Life Science Compliance Update, a monthly publication dedicated to compliance professionals, and the president of Rockpoint, a medical education company. In addition, I'm a founder of an association, the CME Coalition, which is a lobbying organization, lobbying and education organization for CME providers. With us today, we have Brian Dahl. Brian is a principal at Dahl Compliance Consulting. His consulting practices focuses on assisting life science companies with their corporate compliance needs. He spent 6 years as compliance director at Teva Pharmaceuticals, where he built the compliance program from the ground up. And in addition, also Brian's career, he began at Takeda in 2001, just 6 months before the government's seminal TAP pharmaceutical case, where he set up the compliance program there. He is also serves as the chair and editorial advisory board of the Food and Drug Law Journal. And prior to becoming a compliance professional, Brian's practiced health law at the firm of Baker & Daniels. And he began his career practicing in Washington, D.C., first at the Federal Trade Commission and later with another law firm. Also, we have with us today is Ned Mutos. Ned has 20 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry as a practice director for the pharmaceutical services at Stribo. He is the leading transparency derivative program in the U.S. and EU. He serves as life science practice leader at SAP Business Objects and EMC Consulting. Ned has also had several Sunshine implementation programs in the U.S. as IT director at Otsuka, Eisai, Wyeth, and others. He is an alumni of SUNY New York and its Master's of Business Administration program and his Master's of Information Science. We also have with us today Mohammed Ovas. Mohammed is the managing partner at Stribo and leads the information management practice. Mohammed has a passion for helping life science companies utilize data to gain competitive advantages. Before joining Stribo, Mohammed served as principal consultant with Kaleido and had held various positions, including technical architect with IBM and technical lead at Bow Street. Mohammed has earned his bachelor's degree in computer science from Rice University in Texas, and he graduated in the Entrepreneur Mastership Program and collaboration between entrepreneurships and MIT Enterprise Forum. He currently lives with his wife and 3 daughters in Sugar Land, Texas. Let's go to the next slide here. So why are we here today talking about data mining and transparency? Recently, in the January issue of one of our publications, Life Science Compliance Update, we looked at two different cases that both were data-driven and both very important to think about. One was an article titled "Gold Mining FAC and Emergence of Data-Driven Whistleblower." The U.S. Department of Justice recently announced a $250 million settlement pursuant to results of whistleblower Keytown lawsuit substantiating false billing claims. At first glance, this may appear as a typical FCA case, but the fundamental role of data-driven medical evidence as it relates to life science-based compliance highlights this case is more substantially significant. Basically, what happened was a nurse and a data guy got together, and they realized that people were overbilling Medicaid for a procedure that they were only allowed to do at certain times. And so they were able to build a case where they were able to get, they were able to get settlements with 500 hospitals in 43 different states based on the data that they had collected. The more pressing concern on this is that vast amounts of publicly available data that can be easily accessed. Recent transparency efforts, including the open payments and Medicare-based data, when coupled together with the use of technologically sophisticated analytics, data evaluation, and other high-level data assessment tools, signals a turning point in Keytown whistleblower actions and ushering in a new gold rush in some respects in the past, according to a Keytown lawyer that had to rely on his client's personal knowledge of any suspected billings and having subpoenaed the government agencies for those documents. Now he has data at his fingertips. Another, which we're not going to go into a lot of detail, was an article we did on open payments data to support corporate liability. This, in case we looked at the INSYS Pharmaceuticals, which we'll go into great detail later in this, but basically it showed the use of data and open payments data in settlements, and which again we will go into later in this presentation. Brian will take you through detail. In addition, earlier this year, Mary Reardon at the HHS-OIG's office, we had an article in Policy and Medicine that said the use of open payment systems as a compliance tool. Companies should think about ways open payment system should be a tool in its ongoing compliance efforts, said Reardon. Companies should generate aggregate reports several times a year to review aggregate payments to individual physicians and use those reports to identify outliers. For example, to determine if the amount and number of payments are legitimate. Reports can also be helpful to identify trends and spikes in the number of payments and the amount of payments in a geographic region. You spend a lot of time and effort in putting these systems together to collect this information. It's important that you go through and look at this data long term. So now our objectives today are to give you compliance teams analytical tools and techniques to utilize for evaluating spend before the CMS submission, and at least one analytic tool or method to be used to reduce compliance program risk for 2015 submission spend. So Brian, if you can take us through the implications of transparency, and just tell me when to go to the next slide and we're there. Brian?
Thank you, Tom. And hello, everyone. No, next slide, please, Tom. As you're all aware, we've already had 2 cycles of data available on the CMS Open Payments website, and soon companies are going to be reporting their 2015 spend data to CMS. And this is a screenshot of just a summary of 2014 data that's been reported to CMS. And you can see from this slide that almost $6.5 billion worth of transactions were reported to CMS that took place in 2014. And that was across almost 11.5 million transactions. So a tremendous amount of data in just 1 year reported to CMS. And that data is only going to grow year after year as companies continue to report the spend that they are incurring with physicians and teaching hospitals. So Tom mentioned that all this data is at people's fingertips now, whereas previously plaintiffs who were suing as whistleblowers or government enforcers were more reliant on the memories or information held by whistleblowers or discovery tactics. So what are the implications of all this transparency? I put those implications in two buckets, basically. The first is the penalties for what is not reported. So the statutory penalties under the Sunshine Act are set out here. The first bullet point under penalties for what's not reported are for negligent failure to report. The second category are for knowing failure to report. So those are the statutory monetary penalties that a company may face for not reporting. But more importantly for our purposes are the second bucket, the second category of implications, the penalties for what is reported. The data mining that Tom alluded to, this is going on, and it's going to continue to, as a way to support claims against companies that are reporting their spend. And these claims are claims of kickbacks that can ultimately lead to claims of false claims act violations. Next slide, please, Tom. So we're going to do it.
And before you go on, Ned, if anybody else who's on, if you can put mute on your speaker, we're getting some feedback, and I'm getting some reports on that. But go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So we're going to look at these implications through some examples of the data mining that's already going on in the context of a case study involving INSYS Therapeutics. So INSYS is a smaller pharmaceutical company that launched its first drug, Subsys, in March of 2012. So Subsys is essentially the company's only product at this point. Subsys is a fentanyl spray that's indicated for breakthrough cancer. It's a spray that is sprayed underneath the tongue. It's intended to help with the temporary flares of severe pain that can come along with cancer. As an opioid, the drug is highly regulated. It has a black box warning, and it's also subject to a REMS program, a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. I just want to let you know as a disclaimer that all the information that I'm going to be presenting on INSYS today is public information. INSYS is not a client of mine, and I have no information about the company that is not public. So everything that I'm talking about you can easily find online or in various publications. So looking at the open payments data for INSYS, we see here the screenshot again from the open payments database. In 2013, INSYS made general payments of just a bit over $2.7 million, covering not quite 7 million transactions. And you probably all know, but just a reminder, the 2013 data is just from 5 months of 2013, August through December of that year. If you were to annualize these numbers, you'd be talking in terms of a touch under $7 million that would have been spent potentially by the company. Excuse me. In 2014, INSYS spend rose to just about 7.4 million across about a little bit over 10,000 transactions. And the CMS data, and I wanted to specifically show you these screenshots so that you can get a sense of what the data looks like on the website. You can search the CMS open payments data, and you can see how much particular physicians are being paid in various categories of spend. And that's exactly what's being done when plaintiffs and enforcers are mining this data to get at specifics of what is being spent, on whom, and for what types of activities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And this is a screenshot from the Strebo database that shows how this information can be aggregated across multiple years and across individuals that are receiving spend. So a bit of a preview on what Ned's going to be talking about later in the presentation. Next slide. So how is this data actually being used now? What you're seeing on the screen now is a complaint, a class action complaint that was filed in October 2014. And this complaint was filed on behalf of purchasers of INSYS stock, and it alleges material misrepresentations and omissions about the sales and marketing of Subsys. INSYS's product. Basically, this is a complaint that's alleging violations of the securities laws. Among the sales and marketing tactics that are being complained about are payments to physicians. And you can see that I've called out paragraph 119 from this complaint, which references the attached Exhibit D. Exhibit D is a 39-page spreadsheet that sets out data, spend data, that the INSYS made to physicians over the 5-month period in 2013. And again, this data is all pulled directly from the CMS website. And it goes on, some of the highlighted language here, they talk about specifically there are 170 doctors who received payments from INSYS for serving as essentially the speaker, promotional speaker for the company. Next slide, please. Paragraph 119 goes on. It details how much the company paid to physicians over the 5-month period in 2013. It indicates that some of these doctors were paid tens of thousands of dollars. And then at the very bottom there in the highlighted language, you can see that 120 of the physicians who received patients wrote 30% of all the fentanyl prescriptions for INSYS. And then specifically the complaint says defendants appear to have targeted these doctors and rewarded them generously for writing substance prescriptions. So essentially what this complaint is doing is alleging that these payments were kickbacks to induce these physicians to write prescriptions, which obviously would be illegal under the anti-kickback statute. What's coming on your screen now is a summary sheet of Exhibit D, that 39-page spreadsheet. And it sets out the different categories of spend, the total spend of all physicians, that $2.1 million number. Then it breaks it down by the top 10 physicians, for it at $68,000. And then the total of all payments to everyone except for those top 10, which is $1.6 million. And again, this is all data straight out of the, as you can see, the citation at the bottom, straight out of the CMS Open Payments website. So again, plaintiffs in this case, in this class action, are using this data to make the case that these payments were kickbacks, and they're even identifying outliers who were responsible for a large percentage of the prescriptions written for substance. To give you a sense of what the top doctors were getting paid by INSYS, you can see the amounts that the top 10 received, ranging from $64,000 down to $36,000. And again, remember, this is 5 months worth of data, so if you annualize this out, most of these doctors would have, over the course of a year, would have earned in the range of $100,000 in speaker payments from INSYS. And that was in 2013, and that was the first full year of the product in the market. Next slide, please. So INSYS has agreed to settle this this class action, so again, the complaint was filed in 2014. And they reached a settlement mid-year last year, and they agreed to pay $6,125,000 to settle this case. There was a hearing scheduled last month for the judge to approve the settlement. I had not seen any indication that it is finally approved, but that hearing was supposed to take place. But remember, a central feature of this case, again, was the spend data reported to CMS, these payments to these speakers being alleged as essentially kickbacks for writing prescriptions. Next slide, please. So the state governments are getting into the act too. Last August, INSYS signed an assurance of voluntary compliance with the Oregon Attorney General involving allegations of improper financial incentives to physicians to get them to write substance prescriptions. INSYS settled this case for $1.1 million. Next slide, please, Tom. And in the document that the Oregon AG originally sent to the company, it's called a Notice of Unlawful Trade Practices. That basically sets out the state's allegations. This was a document dated in July of last year. And as you can see, the state is alleging that through the payments that it made to doctors, and there are a few doctors specifically mentioned here, INSYS sought to increase its prescriptions for substance. And these doctors, one doctor in particular, was chosen as a speaker not because he was qualified to speak about the drug, but rather to incentivize him to prescribe. Can we go back, Tom, quick? So you can see there's a couple of doctors in particular that are called out here who were responsible for writing a very large percentage, 80% of the prescriptions filled in Oregon over the course of 2013. So what we see here is the Oregon AG is specifically connecting the dots between payments that have been made to speakers and the prescriptions the speakers have written for substance. So they're taking two sets of data and they're mining them to make the allegation that the payments that the company is making were intended or resulted in prescriptions being written for the company's product. So that, again, identifying outliers, and identifying outliers is something that companies themselves should be doing even before reporting this data to CMS. There should be monitoring going on so that companies can identify what in their data may jump out as a red flag and be able to take steps to mitigate the risk of that data. So we've also seen an organization called the Southern Investigative Reporting Foundation connect the dots between payments to MDs and prescriptions written by MDs. These are two articles from last year, one from July and one from April. And these articles detail the payments received by a number of physicians from INSYS. Again, all the payment data was retrieved from CMS Open Payments Database. And CERF, the Southern Investigative Reporting Foundation, did some investigative journalism to really get at these payments through the database and highlight what the company was doing with respect to its payments. So next slide, please, Tom. So you'll see here I'm calling out some particular language where CERF discovered that data in the database revealed that over 2 years, 2013, 2014, INSYS spent $204,000 on a Dr. Friedman. And $147,000 of that came from speaking programs that the physician did in 2014 for the company. The article goes on, next slide please, to examine the Medicare prescription database or Medicare Part D records to show that not only was Dr. Friedman taking a large sum of money from INSYS, he was also the 15th highest Medicare prescriber for substance in 2013, and that's the last year that this data was available when this article was written. So again, like I said before, making the connection between amounts being spent by the company on its speakers and the amount of prescriptions that are being written by those physicians. Next slide, please. The article also charts out other physicians receiving significant payments from INSYS and showing the Medicare prescription rankings, and you can see Dr. Friedman is at the top of this list. Next slide, please. In the April article written by CERF, they also examined the highest writers of prescriptions reimbursed by TRICARE. You can see this is that list, and there are a couple of physicians at the top of this list that are really outliers with respect to the number of prescriptions they wrote as well as the amount that was reimbursed for those prescriptions by TRICARE. Those two physicians, Dr. Ruan received almost $100,000 in speaker payments from INSYS in 2014, and Dr. Couch received $45,000. Both of these physicians were arrested in April of last year on charges of healthcare fraud and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, since an opioid is a controlled substance. Next slide, please. In fact, these two doctors are not the only two who write a lot of substance prescriptions and who have gotten into trouble. You see here from this New York Times article that INSYS has used a few different physicians as speakers who have run into either disciplinary action with their state medical board or legal action with the feds. So Dr. Somerville, you see here at the top of this article, he received $67,000 from INSYS in 2013, making him the #1 recipient of payments from the company. He was disciplined by the Texas Medical Board. Dr. Auerbach, lower in the article, received $56,000 from INSYS, making him the #3 recipient. He was arrested and is facing charges. And as soon as we can get to the next screen, we'll learn some more about that. All told, you'll see on the right side of this article that 5 of the 20 physicians who received the most money from INSYS over 2013 to 2014 have faced legal or disciplinary action. And we seem to be a bit froze up. Tom, are your slides advancing on your end? There we go.
No, for some reason they're not.
There we go.
Hold on one second.
We just took off.
Okay.
So this is the criminal complaint that was filed against Dr. Auerbach. And again, they're drawing the connection here between the money that he's receiving from the company and the fact that he's the top prescriber far and away of substance. Again, he was arrested in May of last year. So next slide, please. So the payments to him by INSYS have since dried up. But on the next slide, we'll see the 2013 data, where he received a total of $90,000 from various companies, $46,000 of which was compensation from INSYS for speaking and consulting. So over half of the amount that he received from pharmaceutical companies in 2013 came from INSYS. So what this discussion stresses is the importance of monitoring your top docs in your speaker bureau or whatever it may be you're paying doctors for, monitoring and doing more frequent background checks because you don't want a speaker, you don't want an advisor working for you who's been excluded. So it's important to do some probably more than annual background checks on those individuals. Next slide, please. So the INSYS story isn't finished. The company has 2 outstanding subpoenas, one from the OIG and the other from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts. And I think we all know about the types of penalties that could be possible when the OIG and the DOJ get involved in a case. The company is also reported to be under investigation by 6 other states outside of Oregon. So, going back to my point at the beginning, the penalties for what is being reported under the Sunshine Act for kickbacks or FCA violations are likely to be much more significant than any of the statutory penalties. We can move on to the next slide, please, Tom. As the OIG and the DOJ really start to mine the data that's being reported to CMS, we're going to see, I think, more and more of these types of activities. Now, I'm not encouraging you to not report your data. Rather, I'm encouraging you to put controls in place to make sure that you can manage the risk of the data that you are reporting. So I want to leave you with this from the OIG. Tom alluded to Mary Reardon's presentation at the PCF Congress back in October. And this is a slide from her presentation where she has encouraged or suggested that companies think about the risks associated with payments that they're making from a kickback standpoint. Think about open payments. And Reardon really encouraged companies to use the open payments data as a tool in their ongoing compliance efforts. And Tom, you read some of her statements. So I think that is good advice to take to heart to be able to monitor that data that you have access to now as a result of pulling it together to report under the Sunshine Act, to monitor that, to make sure that that data isn't going to raise red flags. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ned.
Our next speaker is Ned Montas, and Ned, you go ahead. Ned? Mohammed? And I'm handing over the reins to Mohammed to run it. Okay. Mohammed, Ned?
Thank you, Tom. This is Mohammed. So I have the slides. I will let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen, Tom?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is Ned, are you there? Can you unmute
just
Ned?
give his, okay.
Hi, this is Ned. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Ned.
This is Ned. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yes, go ahead, Ned.
Okay, very good. Sorry about that little glitch. So my name is Ned Mumtaz. I'm the Pharmaceutical Life Sciences Practice Leader for Strebo, and it is my pleasure to discuss with you CMS compliance reporting risks and strategies to manage those risks. Brian just made the case for the pharmaceutical manufacturers to monitor their spend to manage various risks. To summarize, I would qualify the spend reporting risks into three broad categories. Next slide, please. And the three categories that I would summarize the risk into is, number one, incomplete spend report. Simply a situation where there's missing spend transactions that were required for CMS reporting. Second, incorrect spend report in the sense that the amount on the report is inaccurate. So you have the transaction, but the amount reported is incorrect. And third category is suspect spend. And in that category, I would bucket things like false claim, fraud, and potentially questionable spend that can raise inspection and suspicions. So what I want to do next is to share with you ideas and recommendations and strategies to cover and manage these risks. Next slide, please. So broadly, I would like to share three strategies for pharmaceutical manufacturers to manage the CMS spend reporting risk. And those three strategies center around handling the volume, having a method to look for exceptions, and ensuring data accuracy. And I'll cover each of these strategies in turn. Next slide, please. So the first topic that I want to cover is how do you handle the very large volume of transactions that most manufacturers have that they have to report as part of the aggregate spend regulation. With several thousand spend transactions, how do you effectively monitor them? So my recommendation stands around two guidelines. First one is to monitor aggregated transactions summarized to a pragmatic level and verify those summary totals. And the second part is to use tools and data mining techniques to spot exceptions without going down to tracking individual transactions. And what I would like to do is demonstrate these two strategies through a dashboard. I'm going to ask my colleague Mohammed to help bring up a dashboard where I would like to share with you a summarized dashboard. So this is an example of aggregated data where you have information summarized across all the spend. And the idea around this is that you look at your spend from a bird's eye view and evaluate if your overall spend amounts look accurate and reasonable. By the way of illustration, in this example, the teaching hospital spend for 2014 stands at 0. So this is an example where you would look at that anomaly and establish that is that indeed true. Also, by the way of illustration, you are looking at 2013 and 2014 total spend. And for manufacturers who are currently looking and managing their spend data for submission by end of March, what you can expect is you can expect a third row underneath, which would be showing your current 2015 spend and doing that comparison. You also have at this dashboard
aggregated spend by specialty, and this gives you an opportunity to look at your spend by drug category and evaluate if that distribution is reasonable. So just to summarize, the idea is something that to have a dashboard that's simple, easy to use, repeatable, and gives you an instant big picture view at the aggregated level. Next, what I would like to do is walk you through a scenario where, using the power of data mining, you look for exceptions at the individual transaction level without having to go and read through each transaction. So with that, I'm going to transition the presentation to my colleague Mohammed, who would present to you the next example of a data exception outlier. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you, Ned. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Ned went through, we were looking at high-level aggregations of the data, and now we want to look closely at individual spend transactions. So what you're looking at here is a dashboard that allows you to drill in to individual nature of payment categories on the left, and you can search by company. This is again based on the public data available, but if you're using this tool for your current year, you would have your 2015 data that's not published into CMS also available for visual inspection. And when we look at food and beverage, continuing with the INSYS Therapeutics scenario, we find that there is a transaction that seems to be an outlier for the particular category of food and beverage. So we see a lot of their transactions spend under a certain range. This looks like under 650, but we find a transaction that sits here at 1250, right? And we've seen some scenarios here in cases where these are as high as 2000 or above, right? And it's not to say that this isn't a transaction with an issue, but it could be something you want to investigate further. Maybe it's a misclassification where lodging has been entered as food and beverage. So that would be one example of looking at it visually with an analytical data mining tool to actually spot these outliers. Another factor in this dashboard on the right you see is what we call the bell curve. In speaking with compliance officers, there's always an interest to know, am I within the bell curve or am I outside the ranges? So what we draw for you for a particular nature of payments is the bell curve for that particular nature of payment. So at the bottom is INSYS, at the top is the industry, and we allow you to choose if you're part of the drug industry or device. We've already categorized all the filing companies into drug or device or both, and then you can look at the bell curve that matches your industry. So in this case, we quickly see the average or median spend of INSYS in food and beverage is actually way higher than the average industry spend in food and beverage. So this gives you an example of what a dashboard at the transaction level can actually give you insights into your large amounts of data. Now I'm going to take you back to again another aggregated example where we look at overall spend by a company across a variety of dimensions. So for example, imagine that this is your company and you're able to look at, and this is just the published data. If we had your 2015 data loaded in the system, that would also show up. So you can quickly spot physician spending, overall teaching hospital spend. You can see spending by month. Of course, 2013 only shows up from August and beyond. You can see spend by type of payment, and then you see even by specialty and by nature of payment. One thing immediately that you might find interesting here is some of the specialties here have a higher spending even in 2013, right? So while 2013 only has 5 months of data, we see several different specialties. For example, allergy and immunology in this company actually has a higher spend in those 5 months than the 2014. And you have this month filter where you can drill it down so that you have an apples to apples comparison. Just compare August to December. And again, the idea here is putting another data set here with 2015 will give you this month-to-month comparison between research in general, comparison over different specialties, and comparison by nature of payment. So quick bird eye view that gets you, at least in the state where you feel comfortable, I'm not seeing any huge variation in terms of month to month or other categories. With that, I'll pass it back to Ned.
Thank you, Mohammed. So, so what you saw was two strategies in terms of managing your spend by looking at transactions at the aggregated level and looking for any anomalies or unexpected volumes, but then also using the capability of data mining to spot for you exceptions and then inspecting just those exceptions for any data anomalies or spend anomalies. Next strategy that I want to discuss with you is to define a method to help, again, chase individual exceptions, but to have a systematic plan to regularly monitor for exceptions and anomalies. In terms of doing so, the guidance I have is that what you want to consider is look at the data across several different cross-sections. By cross-sections, what I imply is you look at the data by physician, you look at the data by hospital spend, you look at the data by spend type, by drug, by geography. The intent here is that many times data hides some of those exceptions or inaccuracies if you just look at the data in pure summary level across a single paradigm. But when you start to look at it across various slices, some of those exceptions begin to show. Sometimes you begin to observe very high spend for a physician. Another example is you might begin to see very high spend in certain parts of the geography that you didn't expect. So with that, I would again request my colleague Mohammed to share with you a couple of examples of looking at the data by various slices and looking for exceptions or unexpected results. Over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Ned. So while I take you through some more examples of looking at data through various axes of analysis, I just wanted to briefly mention that the question and answer session will happen at the end of this. So if you have any questions, feel free to submit on the panel, and we'll certainly take that in the end. So I'm moving towards now looking at data by physician. So for example, this dashboard is an analysis of looking at physicians at the individual physician level. And again, keeping our tradition of looking at INSYS and their physician, which Brian brought up in his use case scenario, we're looking at Gavin. And Gavin is a physician that has gotten several pharma companies to work with him. And we can quickly see that there is this one pharma company that has spent a big chunk of money with Gavin, right? And when we look down on it, it's INSYS Therapeutics, right? And by percentage spend, INSYS is 57.9% of the entire industry's spend on this physician. We have the ability to then drill down into this particular spend, and we can see by month. We can also see majority of INSYS spend on this physician is actually in the category of speaker events. So this gives us a scenario where we can look at individual physicians to manage our compliance risks when we're spending, with them or working with them. Here, I'm going to walk you through another dashboard, which is what we call a physician probe. This actually takes a more aggregated look at physicians, right? So you pick a company, again, we'll take INSYS here, and then you look at different specialties and different types of payments, and our algorithm actually ranks different physicians into the panel, and it gives you a spend ratio. So this ratio actually gives you the spending, your spending compared to the industry's total spend on that physician, right? So if you're looking at a high spend ratio, which means you're actually paying that physician a lot more compared to the industry, then there is a case where you might want to investigate whether that spend has anything that might be a cause for investigation. We also give you ability to customize different types of flags, red and yellow here, based on different criteria. And for example, I'm looking at a specific physician, and when I click on it, I can quickly see that this guy has a spend ratio of 0.1, so we are not the highest spender on this guy, we being INSYS, but there's other companies that are actually spending quite a bit on different nature of payments for this physician. But the algorithm here will rank and classify and only give you physicians which you should actually be investigating as you look towards filing your report. And then the last example in this scenario is doing so by geography. So we mentioned different axes of analysis. Here we can start to look at, some of us are more visual when it comes to maps, right? So we can start to drill in when it comes to spending by different states within the US, right? And as we drill through, we can start to look at our spending by specialty, spending by physician. In this scenario, we're actually bringing spend throughout from all of open payments data, and we can see the spend by teaching hospital. Again, this is not limited to just these dashboards, but I'm just giving you a few set of examples to support the use case that Ned has highlighted. Over to you, Ned.
Thank you, Mohammed. So the next approach and strategy that I want to run by you is around data accuracy by engaging multiple stakeholders to help verify spend. And I want to bring this scenario to life by sharing with you that a standard rule in quality control is to ensure quality at the point of origin. And we want to apply that same paradigm to data accuracy in your CMS submission. And the suggestion is to improve it by engaging your stakeholders to looking at their spend at the source. The question is, how does one do that beyond just certification? The recommendation is that you engage your stakeholders by giving them something that is easy to use, allows them to verify their spend, and I feel this is best shown through an example where compliance is engaging, let's say, marketing to look at their speaker spend and verify and give feedback, and providing them a tool where they can supply that feedback online, real time, back to compliance. So with that, I'm going to again request my colleague Mohammed to share an example of this with you.
Thank you, Ned. So the idea here is on this compliance journey, you're not alone, and you have other departments in the business that can help you verify the spend at the source. But to engage them properly, you got to give them something that interests them, right? And marketing is always interested in speaker bureau and speaker programs. So here in this example, what we are actually going to show you is the ability to pick up specific specialties, specific states, specific companies, and then you can start to see that companies' overall speaker program. So in this case, I haven't limited it by any search, but for example, I'm seeing AbbVie conducted 436 speaker programs, Celgene has conducted 224. And once I click on one of those rows, I can also start to see what those specialties were in which, for example, Celgene has conducted those speaker programs. So if I have a drug in the same therapeutic class as Celgene, for example, in dermatology, my marketing department is going to be very interested in what Celgene is paying for its speaker programs, right? And we can quickly see the minimum spend is $1,250, the maximum speaker program event is $4,800, and the average is $2,620. And we can also see from this example, Celgene actually pays higher to dermatologists than internal medicine. And as we drill in further, we can also see the drug that Celgene is spending this money on for the speaker programs. We can also see the spread out of the payments. And in this dashboard, we're showing you very high level aggregated. We have several other dashboards that actually take it down to the physician level, which show for an individual physician what type of speaker program fees he's getting from different companies. And as the marketing person, in addition to helping you verify your spend using this type of dashboards, your marketing team might also be interested in further negotiating with the physician if they're seeing other companies that run smaller speaker programs or limited quantities are paying those physicians less. So it can also become an area where they can actually find value, and that value will then drive them to help you. With that, over to you, Ned, again.
All right, thank you. I'm looking at the clock and I realize I have a couple more minutes, so I'll try to quickly summarize. Next, what I want to do is show you a little bit about and give you a little bit of information about the platform and the tool that we shared with you in order to help you manage risk before submission. Broadly, this tool is built on an enterprise strength database engine that's capable of churning very high volumes of data. It sits in an industrial strength cloud environment at Amazon with comprehensive security and has a powerful data visualization, data mining tool that's bolted on top. That's what's behind the scenes in the engine, but broadly from a user-consumer standpoint, this is a software as a service solution, which means if you have access to the internet, which is what you're using to get to this webinar, you have access to this full capability available. It's preloaded with CMS 2013 and 14 data and is ready to accept 2015 data from you. And also it has all the visualization that we just shared with you, a very small set of it, but you have a comprehensive suite so that you can look at the data across many different cross sections. Next slide, please. Again, two aspects to it. On the left is data collection. On the right is the ability to analyze data. And just one point here that it also allows you to create your own dashboards or ask your own questions and get those back in the same type of comprehensive visual capability that you saw in these dashboards. Next slide, please. Quick word, the media has been very kind in recognizing some of these capabilities. We have Tom Sullivan from Policy and Med. He had looked at it and he felt that this offered value to the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical Commerce had similar viewpoint, and CIO Review ranked Stribo and its offering in the pharma space as amongst the top 20 most promising companies. With that, I want to transition to my colleague Mohammed, who wanted to share with you next steps in your quest to manage your CMS submission risk. Mohammed, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ned. So with all this talk about penalties and government using this data, the next question in your mind might be, how do you get started? So we recognize that you have a very short window to monitor and verify your spend data for the 2015 submission. And to assist you with your monitoring needs, we're offering you a 2-month subscription for free when you sign up for a year. This will allow you to use a 1-year subscription of our Open Payments Vital platform for both your 2015 spend auditing this year and for your 2016 spend analysis for next year. And it goes without saying, but our software comes with a 100% money-back guarantee, so there is no risk to you. You can always return it and ask for a refund. We're compatible with all the major aggregate spend tools out there, so regardless of what you're using, you can provide data in the same format that CMS accepts, and that will be uploaded in our platform. And yes, you can get started within a week of sign-up to ensure you get to use it before this year's submission deadline. With the time frame for this webinar so close to the submission date, we only have a couple of weeks to get you onboarded for you to be able to use the full power of the platform for this reporting period. We feel this offering will allow some of you to take advantage of open payments analytics to mitigate the risks of audit and penalties that Brian and Tom talked about earlier in the webinar. I will now hand the control back over to Tom for a summary and Q&A, and I will forward the deck to the next slide where you can have all of our contact information to sign up for this offering. Over to you, Tom. Tom, you are there. I can change you to the presenter.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. I forgot to take it off mute. I thought I pressed the button. I hadn't. So just FYI, there is some questions that have come in. And if you do have any questions, by all means, please ask them. We have one that says, and this again is for Brian, how much is the penalties for kickbacks and false claims act and false claims? Do you know off the top of your head, Brian, what the formula is they use?
Under the statute, under the anti-kickback statute, there is an $11,000 per violation statutory penalty. So that's where you start. Now, when you see the settlements, you will see settlements depending on the size of the company and the degree of the violations. You will see settlements ranging from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to hundreds of millions, and even we've seen a few settlements up to billions of dollars. A lot of those involve off-label promotions for kickbacks, but that kind of gives you a sense of what's happened in the past. So it's really going to depend on what the ultimate settlement amount would be, or the penalty amount would be, depending on how broad the transgression was, the size of the company that is involved with any transgression. But that statutory penalty under the anti-kickback statute is $11,000 per violation.
I have another question. Is this tool available for use in open payments? And what would be, is the subscription an annual a flat rate, or is there a sliding rate to this? This is from Mohammed and Ned.
Ned,
Guys, are you unmuted? Yeah.
So very quickly, this tool is available on subscription basis, and in terms of the subscription fee, it is fairly nominal, and it's based on your volume, number of specialties, and such. So you have the information on the screen. We would encourage you to reach out to us, and we can very quickly give you a summary of those subscription fees.
Does your tool, another question that came in, does your tool address the data include all the CMS reports data, i.e., does it include research? Does it include the ownership database?
Yes, it does. It includes complete CMS data.
Very good. And why is it, Ned? I mean, Brian, if you can just reiterate the why, what other people do you think will be accessing this data, and how, and what can companies kind of do now that they know they can look at the data? What can they do to internally to fix some of the practices that they may identify?
Well, I think as far as in terms of who's looking at this data, it can be anybody. There's a public database, so anybody can be looking at this data. Government enforcers, I believe, are examining this data to, like I was talking about earlier, identify outliers, identify payments that look suspect or questionable. So it's the government enforcers, whether it be the OIG, the attorney generals, the district, or even state attorney generals. So it's those enforcers, and it's private plaintiffs as well, whether it be whistleblower plaintiffs who are ultimately bringing the cases that the government often intervenes in. And so a whistleblower attorney can use the database to validate the story that a whistleblower is providing around payments that may have been provided by a company. And then also other types of plaintiffs' attorneys. We talked about the class action that was filed against INSYS. And so class action attorneys can be looking at this data as well to generate a case that a company is misrepresenting its marketing tactics by making payments that may be suspicious payments when it's not disclosing that sort of information in its SEC filings. So those are the types of individuals that may be looking at the data. And I think things that can be done to try to avoid some of the red flags and manage the risk is the monitoring that we've been talking about. So if you're looking at your data over the course of a year rather than at the end of the year when it's all said and done, but if you're monitoring your data on a quarterly basis or even a monthly basis or some sort of periodic basis, you can start to identify these outliers early on and take steps early on to mitigate any risk that may be involved with outlier payments or spends that are being made. For example, perhaps there's a misunderstanding about what a limit is around a meal, or perhaps there's a misunderstanding about how much can be paid to a speaker that may be fair market value. And so if you can identify those things early on, you can start to address them early on and correct them before you have a year's worth of payments that may raise a red flag. So monitoring is kind of the primary tool, I would say, that would be used to try to mitigate risk over the course of a reporting year.
So just a couple of takeaways, and appreciate everybody joining us. A couple of takeaways are prosecutors and key time attorneys will be using this you will utilize sophisticated data analytics. There's a whole lot of data out there now that people can analyze. It's important that you monitor and review your ag spend data during the year. There are tools available for you to review that data. It's also important to look for outliers, perhaps merge and compare with other data sources and analytics. We appreciate everybody coming. Again, we will be sending a copy of the slides to all attendees, and we will also, in addition, be sending out a link to in the next few hours, a link to the recorded audio. I'd like to thank Brian Dahl, Ned, and Mohammed for joining us today. We appreciate your participation. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.